Hello and welcome to Mindscapes, our series of conversations with distinguished men and women whose ideas, work and philosophy have shaped contemporary India. My guest today is a distinguished dancer with a career spanning more than 5 decades. She was the first Indian classical performer to take Bharatnatyam and Kathakali abroad. I'm delighted to welcome Mrinalini Sarabhai.
Thank you.
Welcome. Do you find that you run the Darpana Academy, and you've had sort of successive generations of young people coming to you? Do you find that maybe the interest has diminished in the traditional forms?
Oh no, I think it has widened. It is being used a bit differently. I think where the solo performances were more popular before, people are doing it more in elements of group work. And I think the topics and I think the reflection of society is very important today, because there are so many problems facing young people, so that the dancers are able to express through their work. And I think this is important because dance in India has always been actually for the masses. It has not been something very selective always.
One of your sort of important contributions that you initiated and have sustained, of course, is to use the classical vocabulary of dance to look at contemporary problems, issues, dilemmas, predicaments and aspirations.
Yes, I think that was one of the things I had to do, perhaps being brought up in a very political family and having around me a lot of politicians of the old generation. We always had problems, and I think that because I was a dancer, it was natural that as a poet or as a writer would express these problems in their way of doing it. I did it through dance and through expression.
What were some of the sort of the issues and ideas that moved you passionately and sought expression in your art?
Well, I think one of the first things I did, which was really quite a shock to many people, were dowry deaths. Because when I went to Gujarat, I had not known it in Madras, but when I went to Gujarat, I used to read Gujarati papers trying to learn Gujarati, and I used to hear about dowry deaths. I didn't know what they were till Vikram explained to me, my husband, that these were actually children or young girls being burnt alive because they didn't bring in dowry. And that shocked me so much that I did it through dance. And I kept to the Bharatanatyam way of expression, but still there were no words in it. And even the bowls or shollukatus, as we say, that was used as a language. And it created quite a sensation when I went with it round the world, actually, not even in India, but all over the world. And then I found out that it was as bad in South India as in Gujarat.
Well, you of course sort of married into a state which didn't have an intense tradition of dance, as it were, and so presumably audiences hadn't been exposed to the classical dance forms that you were using. And dance presupposes, beyond the intuitive appreciation of what is happening, a certain cultural literacy. How did you bridge that gap?
Well, I think curiosity bridged it at first, because they couldn't imagine a daughter-in-law dancing. That was one of the first things, and a daughter-in-law from a fairly well-known family who were in politics and so on. So people came first as just to see it, and perhaps make fun of me or tease me or something like that. And then I think the power of the dance caught them. And language was a great barrier and still is a barrier, Tamil and Telugu. So I have done a lot of work with Gujarati and Hindi, but that I found was the most difficult, not the dance, but the actual music, South Indian music. That has been more of a barrier, but now with this tremendous fusion going on, that barrier too is breaking down.
Dance has a very intricate vocabulary of posture, gesture, mudra. How does that transcend cultural barriers? Many sort of dance forms sort of are working more with the elegance of or just a sort of pure
body.
Form and then body. This is much more intricate. How do you make that jump?
Well, that's where I try to jump, and you see, certain positions of the hand are how we talk in India. You look on the road and you will see people asking, what did you say? I didn't hear it properly. These are all natural gestures, only made more beautiful in dance. That is the only difference. So once you explain the basic gestures, and try not to use too many of the gestures, that's what I did first, and made it language a little simplified. And now I think people are beginning to slowly understand. And if you explain to them that isn't that how you talk in real life, only these are done with more beauty, that's the only difference. And then they begin to connect and try to even interpret what we say.
You know, it was this newspaper headline.
There you're using your hands.
1949. Mrinalini conquers Paris. What did you take there, and what were your sort of first attempts at translating the Indian classical traditions of dance for the West?
Well, it was very strange because somebody saw me dance in Madras and invited me to this festival for one night. And it was a very big festival, and I was very happy that I was not known there at all through the families. Both my families were well known in India, so people would always say, oh, it's because of the family she dances. I don't know what the connection is, but that's what they said. All the practice, of course, doesn't matter. Well, anyway, when I went there, I was a complete unknown, and it was a huge theatre, the Palais de Chaillot, 5 stories underneath. And I was very scared, and I did solo Bharatanatyam in the traditional way, because at that time I had not started to do dance dramas. So I did a small dance drama with Kathakali technique, but not with the costume. But the rest of it was solo. And in fact, when the manager of the theatre saw me, he said, oh dear, you're so tiny, you're so small, how will you ever be seen by the audience? And then overnight, suddenly everything fell into place.
Right.
That's the power of the dance.
What do you think is the reason? What are the reasons why we should make a special effort, invest, go out of our way to preserve the classical and traditional art forms?
That's a difficult question. I haven't really been asked it in that way, but I think there is a certain inherent root of every civilization. And these roots are what make us what we are, as separate from another, say from the Greek, or from the Roman, or from the British, or the African, anything. That root is what is essentially, say, for me, Indian. And that the whole aspiration of the dance, the search for oneself, like we have certain wonderful expressions in the Vedas, like Tattvamasi, you are that. I mean, this is not found anywhere else, and dance is supposedly to connect that inner person with whatever you call it, cosmic consciousness, and I find it does. At that moment of dancing, I never feel I'm I really feel that it's the entire cosmos that's within me, and that gives me the expression to dance, and that's a true feeling.
How important is that inner process, that the intensity of the inner feeling that you express in what is a fairly rigorously laid down external form?
No, because the process is the rigor, you see, like meditation or like yoga. Everything, the process is very hard. Try doing yogic exercises. What are you doing it for? It's not just for the body. It's also for the mind and the what you like to call soul. These are words that have been misused when you say soul, but let us say the inner being. It gives you the strength and the connection. It's like a bond. It's like you're going on a long journey and you see the end of it. And it's the walking is all forgotten. It's taken a long time, the days are forgotten, the nights are forgotten. Only that infinite, whatever it is right there, and you are going towards it. But the rigor is of the walking, perhaps starving on the way, perhaps falling down out of tiredness. All that's forgotten at that time.
So you see similarities between the sadhana that we talk
Of
about in a
course.
spiritual practice
Yes.
and in art?
Dance is the greatest spiritual sadhana you can do.
Is it possible to be, for want of a better word, a bad human being, shall we say, or not a good person and be a good performer?
What a difficult question. Unfair. I think if you're not a very good person, whatever good and
Yes,
bad means
yes,
today, I think dance will help you to become
A better
what you
human being.
really should be. And once I remember talking to a very great Swamiji, he's not alive anymore, and I said to him, I said, you know, I cannot meditate sitting down. I just can't. And he said, you're lucky. We can't dance. And dance is the greatest form of meditation.
You've mentioned the family several times. You know, we're all intimately impacted by our family. That's our environment
Yes.
that we grow up in. But are you able to put your finger on sort of specific elements that may have molded you?
Well, I think I had only my mother when I was young. My father died, and it was a very political, she was one of the Congress workers. And I think her indifference to me helped me a great deal. She
That's
was
unusual, isn't it?
well. It didn't matter what I did. You know, women of that generation were so wrapped up in politics that I don't think they bothered much about their children. And so when I said I wanted to be a dancer, and I said that ever since I was born almost, she said, yes, yes, do what you want. I mean, the family was there, and we were all looked after, mostly by nannies and so on. But there was a certain indifference. There was no opposition. And sometimes indifference is worse than opposition, because you have nothing to fight. But somehow I knew very clearly what I wanted, and I'd go to the villages, and I'd come back looking very skinny and thin and dark, and she would say, well, I don't know what you're going to do with your life.
Even though you didn't have sort of something to fight, resist, it was a very unconventional growing up.
Yes, it was. It was very unconventional, and also it was rather a British growing up. We were much more influenced by the British, and it was little later that my mother went into politics when Gandhiji's Satyagraha started. And so I had the Victorian kind of feeling and looked after by a nanny. So while it was very English in some ways, that is where I think something guides us.
And yet to sort of go out
Yes.
and dance in public was very
Yes.
sort of un-Victorian in its
Yes,
in its
exactly.
standards.
No, but
and
what was most difficult was to find teachers. I didn't know where to go. And that is where I feel I was led. There's so many things that happened in my life that I was led to these teachers one after another, and that they accepted me. Because I was very different from the normal routine kind of a girl who came from South India.
And then, of course, you got married into a very sort of illustrious,
Yes.
well-known family.
Yes,
How did that marriage happen?
quite by accident, or rather I should say by purpose. No, we met when he was studying in Bangalore and I was dancing in Bangalore. The families knew each other vaguely because both the mothers were in the movement, Swadeshi movement, and they had met. And so, you know, as many families in India know each other, not very well, but we know of each other. We met and we both decided we were career people, and therefore nobody should ever get married. Well, that lasted a little while, and then suddenly we decided that it was perhaps better to get married, as we didn't want to be separated. You know, I felt that he was in North India. To me, Gujarat is still North India, and I was in the South. He had his work doing research. And so I just took the whole of South India there. I made Gujarat quite South Indian now.
Your husband was a legend, is a legend, and so are you. What was it like for two legends to be living together?
Well, we never thought ourselves as legendary. We were two hard-working people, and I think that if I had not been a career person, career in the sense of dedicated to my work, it could never have worked out with Vikram, because he worked, as somebody said, he burnt the candle all three ends. He was really working much too hard all his life. He worked at, you know, he set up about 24 of our big institutions in 25 years, and then he was a scientist, and he was also looking after management, and so really we understood each other, I should say, because I could also spend hours and hours, 10 hours a day practicing and so on. And I think that made for greater understanding and togetherness.
You mentioned your work as a dancer as being a career. We tend not to associate art with a career somehow, particularly the classical forms. To what degree was it a career?
When I say career, I'm talking in the English sense of the word career. In India, I would say a dedication. Sounds better. But it means that somebody who really wanted to dance and who danced all the time, who worked hard at dancing, and dancing was a primary necessity for her life. And that was her life, and that's what I call.
In what ways was it a necessity? What lack did you feel when you didn't dance?
I never felt it as a lack. It's like saying, why do you breathe? And I really have no explanation for it. I only say that it must have come from another life.
Do you believe in reincarnation?
Yes, I do.
Do you have some sense of what you might have been in a previous life?
No, I haven't done. I know the people are doing that regularly now. Regression has become very well known, that you can go back and forth and so on. I mean, that you can know what you are. I've never wanted to. But I can't understand otherwise why in this family, so different, why this tremendous sense of belonging to South India, to the temple, and not in the religious sense, but that it was a belonging. And I was part of that belonging and of that culture. And yet, as I say, we were not brought up in a traditional way.
There are many traditions, Tibetan Buddhism for example, in which if you train the mind sufficiently, you can steer your consciousness into a rebirth of choice. If you could do that, what kind of rebirth would you look for yourself? To be a dancer again?
No, I don't think so.
You've had enough for a lifetime,
no, it's
for lifetimes?
It's very hard work. I think I would like to be, but I would like to be an artist. I think I'd like to be a writer or a singer more than anything else, because next to dancing I like writing and reading. Words move me more than anything else. I love writing and I love the sound of words.
You know, in a great deal of contemporary writing and discussion, there are a number of books, the whole idea of the dance of the cosmos.
Yes.
As a dancer yourself, where do you see these connections in sort of the dance of the universe and the dance that you do?
Well, as I told you earlier, that every time we move, it's a connection with the movement of the universe. Because when you see everything is moving, think of it not as dance but as movement. Can you do without movement? Can your eyes do without movement? Can your hands do without movement? Your entire body and your withinness is also moving. Your thought process is moving. Then of course the stars, the sky, the worlds, they're all moving. So dance is making movement very beautiful. So it's something very, very natural, but made more beautiful because the technique is necessary. Because through the centuries people have realized what is beautiful and what is perhaps not so beautiful. And that's how dance was created. But I'm sure they looked at the stars and at the sky, and movement of water, of rivers, of the leaves as they fall. All this is dance.
To what degree have your insights and your tuning in to yourself, dance has been a technique that you have used, but what are the scriptures, the texts, the philosophies verbalized that have guided and inspired you?
Well, I think the Vedas and Upanishads have moved me tremendously, and I often go back to them for sustenance. Poetry moves me, poetry, French poetry, English poetry, and I can turn a page and see just a few words and something happens to me within. And often on those words I have created a dance form. It may have nothing to do with the words, but it has inspired me. Sometimes just silence inspires me. In fact, one of the first dance dramas I did, not first, but one of them, was done to silence. We danced to silence. And this shocked everybody too. Because how can you have Indian dancing without music? But I said it's on listening. Even as we speak now, there are certain sounds that are going around the room, around the air, which we are hearing unconsciously. And they are affecting us, you and I, as we talk. These sounds are affecting us. We may not realize it, but there are sound waves that are somehow being there, they're dancing within us. And this is what I was trying to express.
Do you consider yourself a religious person in a formal sense?
Not in the formal self, but religious in an informal sense, that I believe in that this earth is more than what you see, that there is a cosmic power, call it what you will, that there are forces that do play upon our lives, and that we can harness those forces within, because I have felt it very often, but not in the normal religious sense.
In what ways can you sort of perhaps have felt these forces?
Well, with sudden inspirations and sudden feelings of something. Yesterday, for instance, I'm doing the Mahabharata just now, but from the point of view of why are we violent? What causes violence in children and grown-ups? Because we are looking at this whole thing of violence everywhere. And suddenly I was wondering what to do with it. And in the middle of the night, a thought came, and that is how I have created this whole thing. Now, where did that thought come from? It was not from me.
What was that thought? Why are we violent?
No, the thought was, of course, for the dance of how to end it. And that the reasons for violence are the way we act or the way we react. These are small things, but little things in the Mahabharata I'm trying to, it's difficult to talk about it just now, it's still under process. But the solution suddenly came to me of how I could finish the dance drama, you know, but in a very different way.
So how much of work is, shall we say, inspiration, and how much of it is perspiration? That's an old cliche.
Both. Inspiration is rarer than perspiration, but perspiration leads to inspiration. If you sit at something and you think of it, it does come. That inspiration does come. Or the solution, like you have in mathematical solutions, you've heard a lot of mathematicians where suddenly they've been working for years and the thought
That's
comes.
the eureka.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Some thought comes that this could be done, and if it's done, it's so. All inventions are done like that in a way. But the work that goes before the invention, or before the thought, or before the clarity, that is your
So to what degree are dancers, or in a more general sense, artists born? Or are they made?
Well, some are made, but some I think I don't know. I can't talk about anybody else really. I'm telling you what I have felt all my life, and what I have worked at, and what I've striven to do.
So you feel that there was a certain sort of raw material that was specific and unique to you, that you were able to work on and mold and develop.
Yes.
Do you think this is genetic? You have 3 generations of Sarabhai's dancing.
No, because when I danced, I was the first Sarabhai to dance, and I was the first Swaminathan to dance. So there was absolutely nothing. That's why I say I believe that these are things given to us from somewhere else. And it's very strange when just the other day somebody said from Europe, oh, the Sarabhais, that is the dancing family. And I thought, I wonder what everyone would have thought.
What the in-laws would say.
Horrified. But it's become like that now because of Mallika also dancing.
It's very much followed.
And very much followed. But again, the change in her is that she, being her father's daughter, has gone into development through dance and drama. Much more than I did. Mine was a thought process that I saw some evil, and so I mirrored it to show. Hers is not that. Hers is both, really, because from me she gets the feeling that she's dancing and there's a great spiritual oneness with both of us. But she does also development, which is her father's really
yes.
passion, and has been very successful in it in villages all over Gujarat.
And what aspiration do you have for your granddaughter?
Whatever she wants to do, whatever speaks to her. I don't believe in making even anyone do what you want to do. They will blossom.
What is your aspiration for yourself now?
I don't know.
Join the club. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.